It was Christmas Eve in Seattle, and the city glistened under a quiet drizzle, lights twinkling faintly through the hospital window. Elena Marquez sat hunched in a stiff chair at the Las Vegas Mercy Medical Center's emergency ward, her arms wrapped tightly around her abdomen as waves of searing pain pulsed through her core. Her 3-year-old daughter, Leah, sat nearby on a blanket, with her favorite stuffed giraffe, quietly humming to herself, unaware that her mother was on the verge of collapse. Elena's phone trembled in her hand as she dialed the only people she could. Her parents. The screen lit up with Mom and Dad, and she clung to a thread of hope that they'd answer with concern. Instead, Margot's voice blared through the speaker, already laced with irritation. "Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again, Elena. We've had these Elton John tickets for months." Elena blinked, stunned, as her father chimed in with a dismissive groan. "You're becoming a real burden, Elena. We're retired. We deserve peace." Their voices echoed louder in her mind than in the sterile hospital room. Even through the pain, it was their indifference that hit hardest. A kind nurse, Ava Lynn, gently approached to check her vitals and noticed Elena's trembling. "Do you have someone to watch your daughter during surgery?" Ava asked softly. Elena shook her head. No one. She had no one. At least, no one who cared. "I might know someone," Ava said with quiet resolve. "A trauma-informed nanny." "She's worked in children's hospitals," as the tears welled in Elena's eyes, not from pain, but betrayal. She nodded, her voice a whisper. "Please, call her." In that moment, surrounded by antiseptic air and silence, Elena realized she was more alone than ever before, and that something inside her had finally cracked. Lying on the stiff hospital bed, as the monitors beeped steadily beside her, Elena Marquez let her thoughts drift backward, because the physical pain she felt now still couldn't match the emotional ache she'd carried for most of her life. She had always been the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who sacrificed quietly while her younger sister Rachel basked in golden light. Growing up, Rachel's scraped knees were tragedies, her piano recitals family events, her whims instantly indulged. Meanwhile, Elena's achievements, honor roll, student leadership, even her scholarship to design school, were met with polite nods or, at best, overshadowed by whatever minor drama Rachel was embroiled in. It had become the silent rhythm of her life. Work hard, be overlooked, repeat. When Elena married Julian, her parents complained about the inconvenient venue, showing up late and leaving early. When Leah was born, they visited once, stayed for an hour, and never offered to help. Still, Elena clung to hope, trying to be the better person. After all, Julian had believed in her, had loved her with a quiet intensity that made the gaps left by her family feel smaller. He used to say, "We don't get to choose the family we're born into, but we can choose the one we build." And so they built one. Slowly, lovingly, through long nights, scraped finances, and shared dreams. But then came the accident. The call that shattered her world. Julian gone. Just like that. No comforting arms from her parents, just a brief voicemail from her mother and a bouquet of flowers. Even then, she had kept sending them $2,500 every month, telling herself that duty was stronger than resentment, that family meant showing up even when they didn't. But now, lying alone before major surgery with her child playing quietly in the corner, Elena couldn't deny the truth anymore. She was never their priority. She was their convenience, and now she was done pretending otherwise. As the IV line slid into her arm and the chill of the saline crept through her veins, Elena felt more fragile than she ever had before. The sterile lights above blurred as tears filled her eyes, not from pain, but from the crushing realization that the people she had supported, loved, and sacrificed for wouldn't lift a finger when she needed them most. Just when the silence began to suffocate her, Ava Lynn, the nurse who had been checking her vitals, returned with a soft knock on the curtain. "I spoke to my friend Naomi," Ava said gently, placing a reassuring hand on Elena's shoulder. "She's a professional nanny, used to work in pediatric trauma care. She's willing to come right away." Elena blinked, momentarily stunned. "But how much does she charge? I can't." Ava shook her head. "Don't worry about that right now. Let's get you through this." Something shifted in Elena's chest, a flicker of warmth in the midst of abandonment. Naomi arrived within the hour, all calm presence and gentle smiles. She knelt beside Leah and spoke to her like they were old friends, easing the toddler's tension in minutes. Watching Leah giggle for the first time all day, Elena felt her chest tighten. Not with fear this time, but with a quiet sense of clarity. These two women, strangers just hours ago, had offered more comfort, stability, and care than her own blood relatives ever had. As the surgical team arrived to prep her for the operating room, Elena asked Ava for her phone. With trembling fingers, she canceled the automatic bank transfers to her parents and sent one final message. "I will no longer be supporting you. My daughter and I deserve better. Please do not contact me again." And with that, the first thread of a toxic bond finally snapped, and something stronger began to grow in its place. The days that followed surgery passed in a haze of medication, whispered check-ins from nurses, and the soft chatter of Leah playing beside the hospital bed. Elena drifted in and out of sleep, her body bruised and tender, but her mind clung fiercely to one thing. She had finally taken a step away from the people who had drained her for years. Naomi was a godsend, seamlessly balancing compassion and professionalism. She stayed with Leah during the day, reading stories and drawing pictures, and took her home to Elena's apartment at night, making sure her little world remained stable while her mother healed. On the third day, Elena finally felt clear-headed enough to check her phone. The screen lit up with 27 missed calls and a flood of texts, mostly from her parents and Rachel. The pattern was predictable. First confusion, then irritation, then full-blown panic. Not a single message asked about her surgery or how Leah was doing. Her father's final text read, "You can't just cut us off like this. We've got a cruise coming up. Those tickets are non-refundable." Elena closed her eyes, trying to swallow the bitter lump in her throat. Then, a new message popped up. From Rachel. "Why are Mom and Dad freaking out about money? They said you had some minor procedure." Elena stared at the screen. So they'd lied to Rachel too. Anger welled inside her, but so did a strange sort of relief. Rachel wasn't cruel, just misinformed. Just a product of the same twisted family dynamic that had always prioritized convenience over truth. She replied with the full story, raw and unfiltered, and within minutes, Rachel responded. "Oh my God, Elena, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I would have helped. I would have come." Elena stared at those words, blinking back tears. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. An opening. A glimmer of understanding, and for the first time since the surgery, she didn't feel entirely alone. Maybe, just maybe, the life she was building wouldn't be one of isolation, but of chosen, earned connection. Back home in her small apartment, Elena moved with slow, deliberate steps, her body still tender from surgery, but her spirit sharper than ever. The once familiar walls filled with photographs of Julian and Leah now felt different, less like a space of grief, and more like the beginning of something new. With Naomi by her side each morning, Leah had structure and security, and for the first time in weeks, Elena could think clearly. Her first action was to contact her attorney and update her will, officially naming Naomi Beck as Leah's legal guardian in case anything ever happened to her. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was a necessary one. Her parents had made their priorities loud and clear, She could no longer risk leaving Leah in the hands of people who saw her as an inconvenience. Next, Elena reviewed every financial record and cleared out any remaining automatic transfers to her parents. What had once been framed as help now felt like theft, disguised as obligation. The numbers added up quickly. Years of deposits made under emotional duress. With those funds redirected, she could finally afford proper child care, pay down medical debts, and slowly rebuild the emergency savings that had been wiped out since Julian's death. Finally, she made one more boundary. She blocked Margot and Lionel's numbers, cutting off their digital lifeline to her bank account and her peace of mind. Only Rachel remained unblocked. For now. Elena wasn't ready to fully trust her sister, but she sensed something was shifting between them. In her own quiet way, Elena had drawn her line in the sand, not with rage, not with revenge, but with a calm, unwavering decision to protect herself and her daughter. She was no longer the daughter, begging for approval. She was the mother, choosing what love truly meant. It came in the early evening, just as Elena was finishing a story, with Leah tucked on her lap. 3 sharp knocks at the front door that shattered the calm like glass. Her chest tightened. She already knew who it was. Peering through the peephole, she confirmed it. Margot and Lionel standing stiffly in the hallway like entitled royalty who'd been kept waiting too long. Margot clutched her designer purse like a trophy, while Lionel's arms were crossed in his signature posture of practiced disappointment. Elena opened the door just a few inches, her voice cool but steady. "What do you want?" Margot offered a syrupy smile. "Darling, we've been so worried. You haven't answered our calls. We just needed to make sure you and Leah were all right." Elena stared at them, unimpressed. "We're fine." Lionel stepped forward, pushing slightly on the door. "It's not just that. We need to talk about this ridiculous financial situation. The bank called. We had to dip into our cruise fund to cover the mortgage." The words hung in the air, bold and oblivious. Not once had they asked about her health, her recovery, or even seen if Leah needed anything. Elena felt her jaw tighten. "I told you. The money stops. That wasn't a lifetime subscription. You made your choices." Margot's voice rose in pitch, sugar turning to vinegar. "But we adjusted our lifestyle based on your commitment." Elena's eyes narrowed. "You adjusted your lifestyle to benefit from mine. And when I needed you most, you chose a concert over your granddaughter's safety?" Just then, Leah toddled into the room, holding her stuffed giraffe. Margot gasped theatrically, "There's my sweet baby." But Leah hesitated, hiding behind Elena's legs. Elena bent down, scooped Leah into her arms, and looked her parents dead in the eye. "She doesn't know you. And I don't owe you." Then, without another word, she gently closed the door, and this time it felt like it would stay closed for good. The next morning brought another knock, but this time it was Aunt Sharon, Margot's older sister and the family's self-appointed peacemaker. Elena opened the door just enough to see Sharon's sympathetic expression, already bracing for the guilt trip. "Natasha, sweetheart," Sharon began, her tone laced with practiced concern. "Your parents are really struggling without your help. They're not perfect, but they're still your family." Elena stood silent for a moment before replying, "They managed for decades before I started helping. And when I needed them for one weekend, during emergency surgery, they chose a concert." Sharon blinked, clearly caught off guard by Elena's unwavering tone. "They didn't understand how serious it was," she said quickly, as if that excuse might soften years of neglect. "They told me it was just a routine procedure, that you were being dramatic." Elena's chest tightened. Even now, even after everything, her parents were rewriting the narrative to suit their version of events. "I nearly died," she said flatly. "And they didn't even ask if I was okay," Sharon tried again. They've made mistakes, yes. But don't punish them like this. They're heartbroken. Elena's voice was steady now. This isn't punishment, it's protection. For me, for Leah. I'm done sacrificing my sanity so they can live in denial. Sharon looked like she might say more, but Elena gently shut the door again, sealing off the second wave of manipulation. This time, there was no tremble in her hand, only resolve. The retaliation came swiftly, not through a phone call, but through a group email addressed to the entire extended family. The subject line read, "A cry for help, from parents who gave everything." Elena stared at it for a long moment before opening it, heart pounding, not from fear, but from sheer disbelief. The message was a carefully crafted sob story written by her father, Lionel, painting him and Margot as victims of their ungrateful daughter's sudden abandonment. He claimed they had supported Elena through so many hardships, only to be cruelly cut off with no explanation. He never mentioned her emergency surgery, never once acknowledged the callous refusal to help with Leah. Instead, the email focused on their impending financial doom, their cancelled cruise, and the unbearable stress of their daughter's betrayal. It was manipulative, theatrical, and expected. What they didn't expect, however, was the reaction. Within minutes, Cousin Noah, a blunt accountant who lived near their Seattle suburb, replied all. "Didn't you just buy a new boat last spring? And wasn't that a new tennis bracelet Aunt Margot showed off at Thanksgiving?" A ripple effect followed. Other cousins, aunts, and even family friends chimed in, privately messaging Elena to ask what really happened. Rachel, who had been reading the thread in real time, texted, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea they were spinning it like this. Do you want me to say something?" Elena's fingers hovered over the keyboard. With Rachel's help, she composed a single, calm response. "I recently underwent emergency surgery. My parents refused to watch their granddaughter because they had concert tickets. I'm now focusing on my recovery and my daughter's well-being. I appreciate your understanding." The silence that followed was more satisfying than any argument, because this time, the truth didn't need to shout, it simply stood tall and spoke for itself. In the weeks that followed, Elena Marquez began to rebuild, not just her schedule or her finances, but her entire sense of self. The weight of obligation that had hung over her for so long was finally gone, and in its place came space. Real, quiet, freeing space. She began with the practical, downsizing from her cramped city apartment into a modest sunlit duplex in a quieter neighborhood, just outside Seattle. It had a small fenced backyard, enough room for Leah to run barefoot in the grass and plant sunflowers in the spring. With the financial pressure of supporting her parents gone, Elena could finally breathe and plan. She carved out a workspace in the spare room and formally launched the side business she'd been dreaming of for years, Marquez Memorials, a personalized digital tribute service for grieving families. The idea had started with the memorial site she created for Julian. Simple, elegant, and full of love. Members of her support group began asking if she could make ones for them too, and so, with quiet intention, she began designing sites that told real stories of love lost, of memories preserved, of lives celebrated. It wasn't just work, it was healing. Through the support group, she met Daniel Coe, a widowed father and former tech entrepreneur who encouraged her to scale her business, helping her streamline workflows and set up a client referral system. Meanwhile, Naomi remained a rock, arriving each morning with steady hands and a heart full of warmth. She didn't just care for Leah, she cared for Elena too, in the simple, grounding ways that true allies do. Rachel began visiting on weekends, this time not as the golden child, but as a sister trying to earn forgiveness. Their conversations were tentative, but real. Rachel confessed that she had never realized how deeply their parents had manipulated the dynamics between them. "I always thought you just wanted distance," she said one evening as they watched Leah scribble chalk hearts on the sidewalk. "But I see now. You were pushed away." Elena didn't have an answer, Not yet, but she nodded, and that was enough for the moment. Most importantly, Elena was no longer surviving, she was building. She wasn't defined by what she had lost, but by what she was now growing. A business with meaning, a home with peace, and a community built not on guilt or blood, but on mutual care and truth. It was a gray Saturday morning when Elena heard the familiar knock, sharp, urgent, and uninvited. She didn't have to check the peephole this time. When she opened the door, Margot and Lionel stood there with a manila folder clutched between them, their once proud expressions replaced by something tight and desperate. "We need to talk," Lionel said, his voice stripped of authority, replaced by a brittle edge. "Please." Elena stepped aside silently, more curious than angry now. At the dining table, Margot laid out a color-coded spreadsheet, numbers highlighted and circled in red. "We're behind on the mortgage," she began. "We've missed 3 payments. The bank is threatening foreclosure." Lionel added, "We need $144,000 to catch up, and fast. Otherwise we'll lose the house." The irony almost made Elena laugh. They had built that house on image, hosting lavish parties, installing luxury upgrades, bragging about cruises and jewelry. Now they were asking her to pay for it. "What about selling the boat?" she asked. Margot winced. "We'd take a huge loss. And the timeshare?" Lionel shifted. "It's worthless now, but those were our retirement luxuries." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Luxuries you can't afford?" "But you could afford them when I was bankrolling your lifestyle." Lionel bristled. "It's the least you could do after everything we've done for you." Elena leaned forward, voice low and sharp. "Tell me exactly what you've done for me, because when I needed you, when I was bleeding, when my daughter had no one, you went to a concert." Just then, Leah's laughter floated in from the next room. Margot turned her head, her face softening. "She's grown so much," she whispered. Elena stood. "She has, without you. Please see yourselves out." And this time the door didn't just close, it locked. The truth came quietly, not with confrontation, but with confession. It was a rainy Thursday evening when Rachel showed up at Elena's doorstep, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, lips pressed into a thin line. Elena invited her in without a word. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the hum of the kettle filling the space between them. Rachel hesitated, fingers twisting in her lap. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. Elena braced herself, her gut tightening. "It's about Leah, about Julian, and me." The words landed like stones. Rachel's voice wavered, barely audible. "During that time when you and Julian were separated, briefly after the miscarriage, before Leah, it was a mistake, a drunken mistake. We didn't mean for anything to come of it." Elena stared at her, numb. "The baby?" she asked flatly. Rachel nodded slowly. "Yes. His. I'm almost certain." Silence stretched so long it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. "You used the money I sent our parents to help raise his child," Elena whispered. Rachel looked stricken. "I didn't know at first. They said it was support. They said you offered it. When I found out where it came from, I felt sick. I never should have let it go on." Tears welled in Rachel's eyes, but Elena had none left. "Do you have any idea what that did to me? I was scraping together pennies to buy Leah a stroller, taking freelance work in the hospital bed, and all while your bills were being paid with my money." Rachel broke down completely. "I was weak. I was selfish. But I'm trying to change. I'm going to therapy. I cut off Mom and Dad financially. I want to break this cycle." Elena studied her. The pain was real, but so was the remorse. "You were raised to believe you could take. I was raised to believe I had to give. I'm done with that story." Rachel wiped her tears. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I had to tell you. You deserved the truth." Elena stood slowly, her voice quiet but unwavering. Now I have it, and I'll decide what to do with it on my terms. It wasn't closure, but it was power. Hers. Months passed, and life, quiet, meaningful life, began to settle into place. Elena no longer checked her phone with dread. The fire of betrayal had dulled into an ember of wisdom, and the space once occupied by guilt had been filled with purpose. Marquez Memorials was thriving. With Daniel Coe's mentorship and referrals from the support group, the business had grown beyond Seattle. Families from across the country were requesting Elena's custom tributes, websites that didn't just mark death, but honored life. Leah laughed more. She had friends, a backyard, a routine. She called Naomi Auntie Nomi, and the bond between them felt more familial than anything Elena had known growing up. Then one day a letter arrived. Not an email or a voicemail, but a handwritten letter in her mother's careful cursive. Elena nearly tossed it aside, but curiosity won. The letter was different. No manipulation, no requests. Just raw, almost painful honesty. "Watching you build a life without our help," Margot wrote, "has forced me to see how little we gave when it counted. I see now that your independence was not a rejection, it was survival. I resented it because I needed to feel needed. I see that now." The letter asked for nothing, only to acknowledge that they had failed her, and that, for once, Margot hoped that Elena found peace. Even if they were no longer part of her life. Elena showed the letter to Rachel, who nodded slowly. "They've been in therapy," she said. "Dad had a health scare. It scared them straight, I think." Elena didn't reply right away. She sat with the words for weeks, letting them settle before deciding. Eventually she agreed to a brief, neutral meeting at a small cafe in the city, with Leah spending the afternoon with Naomi. Her parents arrived transformed, less polished, more human. Her father cried, genuinely, for the first time she could remember. They didn't ask to meet Leah. They didn't ask for money, they just listened. And when they asked, would it ever be possible to know her someday? Elena answered without anger. "That depends on your actions, not your apologies." As she left the cafe, the sun cut through the Seattle mist, warming her skin. She didn't feel burdened. She didn't feel broken. She felt whole and free. The story of Elena Marquez teaches a powerful lesson about self-worth, boundaries, and redefining family. For years, Elena lived under the illusion that love and loyalty must be earned through sacrifice, even at the expense of her own well-being. But in her darkest hour, when those she supported turned their backs on her, she discovered a vital truth. Love that must be begged for isn't love at all. Through pain and betrayal, Elena learned to set firm boundaries, protect her peace, and prioritize the needs of herself and her daughter over the expectations of others. The story reminds us that blood ties do not guarantee respect or support, and sometimes choosing yourself means letting go of people who only show up when it benefits them. More importantly, it shows that healing can begin the moment you stop chasing approval and start building a life rooted in authenticity and chosen community. Whether through Naomi's kindness, Rachel's late but sincere growth, or Elena's own courage to reclaim her voice, the story reveals that strength doesn't always roar. It often speaks in quiet decisions to walk away, start over, and demand better. And in doing so, we redefine not just who we are, but what family truly means.